Hey, me Shane, Gemini Garage, and today I kind of wanted to go over some of these PL-259 connectors here. There's a lot of different types of PL-259 connectors, obviously for different types of coax, but some of them really just don't work very well at all, and you really need to kind of be careful of what you're getting. And also there's different kinds of these barrel connectors. These are not all the same. And then also I've gotten some connectors like this here that were actually defective. So today I just kind of want to go through the differences in some of these connectors, what to look out for, and how to really pay attention when you're putting your coax on your 239 connectors, when you're screwing it onto your amplifier, when you're putting it on your radio, when you're screwing it onto the back of the meter. There's some things you really need to pay attention to keep your coax from working loose and to make sure you've got a good connection. So we'll get into it, so stick with me. Alright, so there's a lot to go over here. Probably should have split this up into some separate videos somehow, but so the first thing I want to go over, and I'll just kind of get out there with it, and that's these barrel connectors. You'll recognize these. These are for if you've got, you know, two pieces of 259 ended coaxes you want to join together. But these barrel connectors are not created equally. You'll notice, if you can see on these, this one has a flat right here on each side, right? No big deal, but just it's got a flat there. This one here does not have any flats there. Okay. And then this one here, this has a knurled section in the middle here, and a little bit less threads, as you can see. Now the problem, whoops, the problem with this one here is because it doesn't have a lot of threads on here, sometimes when you go to put a longer style connector on there, like something like this thing here will bottom out on this shoulder here before it, you know, pulls your connector all the way up to it. So you can see here, while I can screw that on there and it's on there, you can see this part here is still moving back and forth. It's not completely tight and snug up against there. And that's something that, you know, if you're reaching around behind the dash or screwing that on, or you might not notice that when you're putting it on there, that this is loose. And it's only going to take it just, you know, loosening up just a little to not make contact, or even just make poor contact before you start having a problem with it. So again, it's just there's really nothing you can do about it. It's just you've got to pay attention to what you're using. You really, when it comes to your coax and all your connectors, you really kind of need to blueprint your system, which was an old term for just checking every single measurement and every single specification on something you can to make sure that that's right, because if you don't, you can have some problems. So that's my little spiel on the barrel connectors. There's obviously more differences with some of these than what I've got. There's just these three here. They also make something called a bulkhead connector, which is basically like a barrel connector, except they're really long. You can get them like 2, 3, 6 inches long, 8 inches long. That's for like you needed to go through a wall or something like that. So I'll see if I can try and throw a picture of one of those up. But anyways, yeah, just an FYI, pay attention to your barrel connectors, because you might get ones that you know, your coax isn't seating up against properly, and it could cause you a short, and you don't want that. So barrel connectors. Next up, this particular connector here. This is a 90-degree connector, and they're pretty cool. You know, they come in handy. However, I got one that was defective, and it took me a long time before I realized it was defective. I thought a lot of other parts and jumpers and wires and stuff in my system, there was something wrong with it, and it turned out it was this. And what happened was inside of here, you basically got this. And inside of here, there's like this white insulator in there. And this thing unscrews. And so this one goes in there, and then that one goes in there, and they join up. Well, somehow this ended up touching the inside of here. The insulator was bad, or it was poorly manufactured, I don't know. But it caused a short. And, you know, like I said, it took me a really long time to figure out, you know, that it was this. And I just didn't really suspect this, because looking at it, you know, you would think that there's just really, you'd think they'd have enough insulation here that there's no way that anything in here could touch, but nevertheless, it was in fact defective, and it was causing me all kinds of problems. So just another, you know, point to make sure that you check any type of connector, adapter, barrel connector, just any of it. Make sure you take everything out of line and replace it with something else if you're trying to hunt down a short, or if you're trying to hunt down a problem, because you just never know what it could be. If you want to completely reduce the risk of having something like this happen, because I could kind of see how, you know, if this thing kind of gets maybe pushed in this way, or something happens, you know, depending on how this is manufactured, I could see how that could maybe be a problem. So if you want to have a 90-degree connector of some kind and you don't want to have to worry about this, you can get 90-degree PL-259s that you solder on like these, and then you really wouldn't have to worry about that. So that's my my little segment on 90-degree connectors, and just really any kind of connector at all you really need to, because they make these that are straight too. And you know, it's completely possible that you could have something, you know, if one of these is defective and you've got something in there touching. So once again, it's very, very important to check all this stuff, especially these days, because you have a lot of different manufacturers. This stuff's coming from different countries. It might be coming from China, it might be coming from Mexico. You just don't know. So again, any type of connector or adapter, you know, pay attention to it and check it. And with that, I'm going to get a couple other things together right here, and I'll start talking about some of these connectors here. So stick with me. Just a quick little recap. I went over how you really need to pay attention to these barrel connectors, because they can all be a little bit different, and that can cause some problems. And then I kind of went over how any type of adapter, you know, that's got any kind of internals, that if you get something touching in the wrong spot could short out. I kind of went over how you need to pay attention to any kind of adapters you might have, because those can be defective as well. So now I'm going to kind of go over just some of the different types of PL-259 connectors you might come across. This one here is an old Radio Shack one, a crimp-on one. This is actually probably for like a RG58 is what this is for. But some of this RG58 stuff, you've kind of got to be careful with the coax on that, because some of these things, they don't have a lot of threads in here, and some of them have a little bit of a taper. So by the time you start getting it screwed up on there, it starts kind of tightening up a little bit. So again, these connectors are very old. These things are from the, this is probably from like the late 90s, early 2000s. So these are at least 25 years old or so. This one here is also a Radio Shack connector. This is a replacement one that's not a crimp-on one. This one, it unscrews. You solder your end in there, but then you put your ground in there, and it kind of crimps, it screws around your ground. So that's another type of an end there. And again, you know, these generally speaking are okay, but sometimes you will find barrel connectors or other things that these just don't fit on very well. So that's just, you know, just thought I'd throw these in there because these are really, really old. So with something a little bit more newer here, you've got these here. Now this is kind of a newer style connector that's out. I haven't heard anybody say anything bad about these, so I think they're okay. But these basically kind of have a compression fitting and kind of like a ferrule type of a deal there. It's kind of how these things work. You do solder the wire to the tip in there, but then the rest of it's just kind of swedged into place using these. These look like pretty decent quality connectors. I believe the center electrode is Teflon. That's really, I mean, if you're looking for a quality, you know, PL-259, it's nice to have something that's got the Teflon insulator in there. But again, this is a kind of a newer product here, a little different than a traditional connector. I'm not going to get into exactly how to do all these. This isn't, I'll maybe do a video sometime on installing the connectors, but this is just kind of a video, like I said, just kind of identifying what you got and just, you know, paying attention, have an idea what's out there and paying attention to it and making sure it's going to fit okay. So there's these here. If you see these, that's kind of what's going on with these. If you see these on eBay or online, it's kind of got that thing going on there. And then these here. This is an old connector here. This is actually, this one says aesthetic on it. So this is kind of a, I guess you could say this is sort of an older knockoff of an Amphenol, I guess. Like I said, this thing's probably about 20 years old or so here. Don't even know if you can still get these. This is an actual Amphenol connector here. And these are considered by many to be the best, and you know, I can't really argue with that. They're pretty good. There's another brand of these, and I don't know what the brand is, but there's another connector like this that's being sold on eBay and probably some other places. It's basically a clone of this, and I believe those are pretty good as well. They're not actual Amphenols, but they are, I believe, just as good. Their quality's just as good, and they have a Teflon center insulator and all that, so I'll try and throw a picture of those up. So, but you got to be careful though, because you might get some clones of those even. And what I mean by that is, this is a connector here that's pretty common. You used to be able to get them with a white insulator, but it melted too. These are not Teflon insulators. This red one here will kind of melt, and this particular insulator with the white one, as I just mentioned, will melt too. These are just kind of a cheap connector. You can get these on eBay. They're pretty cheap. They come with a reducer in them as well. But these are pretty cheap connectors. You can't put a lot of heat or spend a lot of time soldering on it, you know, because you know you'll melt this centerpiece here. The other problem with these is this is kind of a soft metal right here. So your little teeth that are supposed to mesh in with these other teeth here, you know, like that. This one's got more teeth on it, a little better example. But these things here, there's only a couple of them on there and they're soft. And over time, they end up basically doing what this one did here, and that is they're completely worn off of there, pretty much. So, I mean, this will still make contact, you know, and it'll still work as a connector, but like I said, your main little teeth there just basically get worn down to nubs, and that's kind of not cool. You're not going to have as big a problem with that with these connectors here, because they're just a little higher quality. So that's one reason, like I said, to be careful with those types of connectors, is they don't have a Teflon insulator, so you got to watch when you're soldering on them, and the little pointy thing on here wears down to a nub pretty fast. So okay, so we pretty much covered all these right here. Now I'm going to go into these right here. These are where it can get really confusing, because you'll notice these all look very much alike, and they're very similar. Let me see, I wrote on the bags what the difference is between here. Okay, this one here, this one's got more of a bayonet tip, and it's got a really small little crimp spot here. This is probably actually made for like RG316. And then you've got some here that are for the 316. You've got one here that's probably for the RG400, and then you've got one that's probably, yeah, this one here is for RG400. And you can tell that because the spot right here where you crimp is just a little bit smaller than it is for Mini 8. And I believe this one here is for Mini 8. Let's see. Yeah. This one here is for Mini 8, and this one here is for like RG400. And you can see it's a little bit smaller. And the thing you have to watch is, like I said, when you're trying to buy these online, it's really hard to tell. I've had to just buy, you know, because even if you're buying one for Mini 8, there's no guarantee that, you know, the guy on the other end isn't going to stick this one in the package, right? So, you know, try to find reliable places to buy them from. Buy a small amount or maybe a couple at a time to see, you know, if you're getting what you're getting. Because again, no matter where you go, you're going to have somebody at the other end packaging this stuff. And even if you order it, and even if it looks right, you need to, you know, make sure when you get it, you know, home. Like I said, when you know, you might order 20 of these things and get a bag full and think, oh, okay, I got 20 new connectors. And then when you go to use them, you realize it's got this really small, you know, crimp area on here, or it's kind of the smaller bayonet end on here, you know, instead of, you know, what you want for, you know, your Mini 8. So the other thing too is these two here are both, let me see here. These two here are both for Mini 8. They both look pretty much identical. You'll notice that. They're pretty much identical. This one here seems to have a little bigger hole on the centerpiece here than this one, but otherwise they look pretty much identical. However, the difference is, there is another difference. This one here doesn't have as many threads in it as this one does. I'll see if I can thread this thing off of here. If you look down in there, this one's got maybe 3 or 4 threads worth. And if you look down in here, this one's got maybe 4 or 5 threads worth. And it's probably going to be kind of hard to see it on the camera. I don't know if you can. So that's another thing to take into consideration, and that's something that you're not going to see really on a picture when you're trying to purchase them. Like I said, they pretty much look the same, but this one's got a little bit bigger hole in the middle than this one, and this one's got a few more threads in the collar than this one. So, as I said before, and that doesn't mean that these won't work either. It just means you need to pay attention to what you're getting, because maybe one batch of connectors you get is one way and then the other batch you get is another way. So as I stated before, you really in a way kind of have to blueprint all of this. You have to look at these things. You have to look at every dimension and aspect of them. You have to look at how large is your crimp area, how many threads is in your collar, what type of tip is on here, how big is your hole in the middle. I mean, it just kind of, you know, and as I've mentioned before, a lot of people will just say, well, you can avoid all that if you just buy, you know, the Amphenol ones or buy the good ones. Yes, that's true, but again, you're not always going to have that on equipment. Maybe you bought some used equipment and it came with some coax, or maybe you, you know, you're on a road trip and you got to stop and buy some coax at the truck stop real quick. I'm going to get into that in a second. There's all kinds of reasons why you need to know and pay attention what kinds of coax you're getting. And if you're buying something like RG400 and that kind of stuff online, a lot of that's going to come with the ends already on it anyways. And that's okay. But as I stated before, you just need to make sure that you know, everything in your system's compatible. Maybe you've got all your coax ends and they're all perfect, but for some reason your barrel connectors are like this, and so none of them are really connected. There's nothing wrong with any of your connectors, and there's nothing wrong with your barrel connectors, but they just happen to be kind of you know, incompatible from you know, for the reasons I showed earlier. So, all right, last but not least, I'm kind of going to go down and show you what I got going down here. This one here was just kind of to show that the little nubs on these things here kind of wear off easy. These things are just kind of soft here, and also the insulator in here is not the good insulator. It's the kind that's going to melt on you. They do make this particular style in a white one too. These are pretty cheap. I mean, they'll work in a pinch, but definitely not something I want to use on most of my system if I could avoid it. Most of the stuff that I'll use these, and then you might want to use, if you can afford it, use these. but there may be times when you can't afford it, or you know, are on a budget. So I would recommend getting at least one really good connector that you put on your antenna. Put that one up in the air. That's the one that's hard to get to, and then the rest of them, if you need to replace them at some point, you can do that. So moving along to this one here. This one here, I'm going to just kind of do something a little separate here at the end of the video. This one here, I was just going to kind of show you how you know, while you're doing all this and checking all this, the other thing you want to check for is to make sure that you do not have large, unruly solder blobs on the end of your coax there. Because what happens is that, pretend this is the coax connector on the back of your, you know, your radio or your amplifier or your meter. What's going to happen is if you have just, you know, a really wrecked end on there, it's going to waller this out, and it's going to cause problems on your inside of your connector here. And while this one might make good connections, if you ever put something else in there, then this might be too loose and sloppy to make good contact with that one. So this one here, I actually need to pause it real quick and grab a radio real quick because I want to show you something. Okay, remember earlier how I told you that this could be bad because if you had, you know, the wrong kind of coax connector, it would, you know, the shoulder of your ring would bottom out on here before it you know, snugged your connector up here. All right. Well, the same thing can happen. This is just like some truck stop type, you know, cheap coax. I think it was like 18 feet of it, right? This is a striker. It's a 955 version 1. And I want to show you something. You take and screw this connector on here. Okay, there you go. You're ready to talk, right? Look at that. Look at that. Do you know how many people are, you know, they reached up under their dash or they reached behind their equipment and they put their new piece of coax on there and they think it's on there tight because maybe there's a little bit of stress on your coax, right? So it's not flopping around like that, you know. But that's going to cause you problems. It's going to cause you problems. And the thing is it's probably still going to work. It's just, it's going to be a weak signal and it's just going to be, you know, it's going to be like a short. So, as I said before, you really need to check. Now, there are some radios that this will fit on. It doesn't do that with all radios, but if you've got a radio that's, you know, this doesn't have a lot of jack coming out of the back there. So on this one, you know, it bottoms out on this before it can, you know, snug up the rest of the connector to the 239. So yeah, you really got to watch out for that kind of stuff. And that's one of the reasons that I made this video, is I've had that happen a couple of different times and it was just like, wow, you got to be kidding me. The other thing too that I've had happen quite a few times is just my personal self. When I'm putting a piece of coax together or screwing a couple of pieces of coax together, just a couple of weeks ago I went and I put I screwed a piece of coax onto something. And I went in and checked my SWR and it was through the roof and I was like, what the hell? And I went back and it was tight, but the teeth weren't engaged properly and it was causing to pour ground and it was just, and that's the other thing. Anytime you change any of this stuff, I don't care if you just, unhook it and then hook it back up, 2 seconds later, make sure you check your SWR and make sure it's, like it was supposed to be before you started fiddling with it, because, it can cause some problems. Last but not least, this thing here. This is an end that I put on. I pretty much put most of my own ends on most of my connectors and cables. And I usually don't have a problem with it, but this one here, I had put a couple new ends on a piece of coax, set the coax aside. I needed the coax a couple weeks later, put it in line, and it was getting like a short. And I'm like, what the heck? So I take the coax and I put it on a continuity meter, right? Which is like continuity meter, ohm meter. And I got a continuity meter over here off the side here. So it was making contact. So at some point when I put this end together, one of those tiny little ground braid pieces of wire probably just got, you know, touching in there. The other thing that can happen too is when you're soldering your ends on, solder can kind of get sucked up in here and end up, you know, getting on your braid or your ground strap and causing a short. So I guess the point is, even if you put your own ends on and you do 100 of them a day, if you've got a problem, check it. You just, as I've said before, you can see here exactly why, like I said, I wanted to make this video, is there's just, I've had so many problems that weren't radio related or coax related or anything else. It was just the stupidity of poorly manufactured, differently manufactured, you know, whatever with the ends. This one here really got me when you screw that onto the radio and it's moving around like that. That just, I'm sure that's probably happening all over the place. So, and one more thing real quick, when you're putting your coax on, I like these kinds of ends here because you can back the collar all the way off and see what's going on here. This right here, I don't like these ends because you can't, you've got this, you know, plastic thing on here, and that's another problem too. All of these things have a crimped ground, and those sometimes loosen up and cause problems too. But when you've got this, you know, this plastic strain relief on here like this, you can't screw the collar back and see what's going on. Like for example, this one here, it's on the cable here, but you can screw this back and slide it down and see what's going on with it if you need to. You could actually put this on something and make sure, you can look at that. See, you can look and make sure that's completely engaged on there. And then you can tighten this on there. You can do the same thing with you know, one of these too. You can completely, you know, roll that back so you can see what's going on here. Make sure it's engaged. But that's what you need to do when you're putting a barrel connector in line, when you're putting this thing onto the back of a radio, the back of an amplifier, the back of a meter. You need to make sure that these teeth here on your 259 engage in the 239, because sometimes what will happen is you'll just have it, you know, the teeth will just be kind of touching, you know, on top of each other, but they won't be, you know, meshed together. And at first it seems like it's tight and it's making a connection and you don't have any problems, but then over time, you know, it can loosen up a little bit, which these kind of have a tendency to do anyway sometimes. If it loosens up a little bit, and then, you know, like I said, it's probably going to be touching well enough to work, but you're going to have intermittent problems. So make extra sure that your teeth on your 259 are engaged on your 239, and the collar is, you know, pulling all the way up on it, and you don't have any of that slop in the rear where you can disengage those teeth. Alright, well, I think that's going to wrap it up for this video. Again, I hope it helps somebody. I just wanted everybody to realize that not all this stuff fits together like it's supposed to. I mean, you might go someplace and buy it, you know, some coax and barrel connector, and, you know, all of it's supposed to fit together, but sometimes it doesn't. And as you can see by the way that coax fit on the back of that radio, you really do have to kind of pay attention to what you're doing. So I kind of have a habit of going around every once in a while on the back of my radios or the meter or whatever this is screwed to, and just kind of, you know, wiggle it around on there and push on it a little bit and see if you can, you know, tighten this a little bit. And I'll bet you if you've got a lot of radio equipment and you go around, I'll bet you you've got a piece of coax on the back of something that could use maybe another quarter of a turn. So with that, again, I hope all this helped you, and maybe it'll enable you to hunt down some gremlins you had in your system someplace. So with that, thanks for watching. Che, Gemini Garage.